big up to yourself. These questions came from Azania Shabari. What's a nice name? Azania Shabari. So, the questions are, why is the entire Africa in South Africa? It's a good question. So, I wouldn't want to speak for all the other Africans before I can maybe speak about myself as a Zimbabwean, right? So growing up in Zim, being born, I knew there was South Africa because we read about it in history. It's what was taught to us in all the other African countries. But wishing to have been here and all that stuff, it was not part of the agenda. What happened was, from the stories, and if y'all followed what happened when Zim won its independence, right? I think there's a sit down that happened at the Langsha House, of which I'm not too much into politics in understanding these things, but some of that sit down was to do with land reform and how land was then taken from our white Zimbabwean people by the ZANU regime. The way that happened, it was almost chaotic, and I won't directly speak on that as if I understand what actually the terminologies were. But right there is what caused like the final nail in the coffin for Zimbabwean economy, because some people were given I think 24 hours, 48 hours. As I said, I was between 14 and 16 when that was happening. So I had no say, I couldn't say much. At some point you could just hear people saying, 48 hours, they have to leave the farms, blah, 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 blah. So, I was actually at school, in Ikra Darul El, studying there. So much of this stuff, it was just like news. And then what I know is after that, a few years, things just started becoming bad, things are just expensive. So my mother started to come actually to South Africa more regularly. Yeah, my mother was, coming to the South Africa still in like 90s, like early 90s, to see my aunt and stuff like that. And then at some point in the 2000s, the family came here, of which I was at school in Ikra Darul, and I didn't understand what was going on. I was like 16 then, just before I came to South Africa at age 17. So Zimbabwe, what happened was that whole land reform situation, it devastated Zimbabwe. And the economy was shattered. How? Because majority of the businesses and the industries that were in Zimbabwe were also controlled by, Westerners or Europeans who had ties and relations to the same people who were perhaps told to leave or whose farms were taken. So that caused a lot of sanctions to be imposed on Zimbabwe. And some of the sanctions, they directly affect the country, while some of these sanctions, they affect people in position. So if, say, I'm sanctioned to do certain things, then that means if I'm in power, I won't be able to bring any change or do business with so many countries, depending on the allies of those sanctions. So you're looking at most of those sanctions, they come from America. So America have got the whole allies. So you can say maybe perhaps the whole NATO or NATO will just say, nah, we're not going to support Zimbabwe, for example. Or anyone who is allies with America, they will just say, no, we're not going to support Zim must suffer on its own, stuff like that. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of dynamics that happened. ZANU regime, it's not like they are not to blame in this. I feel like they could have a dialogue that would have not let things to happen the way they happened. So then that land reform situation made the whole Zimbabwean migration start. And it started, from, say, teachers, qualified nurses, qualified everything, engineers, qualified lawyers, leaving the country, some going to the UK, USA, Canada, South Africa, So back in the day, I mean, people moved in, of which that was even before my time to move, of which some people just saw the cracks and stuff like that, like, things about to go really bad. The 2000s came and they were difficult, and people had to start to leave Zimbabwe in like a couple of numbers. So that's when I also left Zimbabwe 2004. For me, it was really not directly economical and stuff, from an artist point of view, and also following mostly the family trail. I ended up here, and of course the conditions were not favored, the conditions weren't good. So I had to work hard to improve those conditions with time. So one of the reasons why Zimbabweans are here in this country is because of the land reform that happened through colonial times, and Zimbabwe was colonized when they sat down to stop the colonization process and enter into from Rhodesia into Zimbabwe. There was agreements that was entered there, of which, I mean, the elders should be speaking about some of these things. Why did things go so terrible? Why did things go so wrong that most of us have to pay for that? So now and then you also hear a question of, okay, you took the land from the white Zimbabweans, so why don't you go and do something with that land? That's a very good question. Why don't we do something with that land that was taken, you see? So the government, I mean, the money. So who has the land? Because the land, I mean, that was taken was not put in the hands of, say, people like myself. That land is mostly within the war vets and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, there's dynamics to Zimbabwe. People will hate Zimbabweans, people will blame Zimbabweans. But majority of these Zimbabweans, I mean, they were just born into problems that they don't even know. But sometimes they will say, a son will pay for his father's mistakes. Why are the Zimbabweans? Why have they moved so much? Because they were not intending to move like that so much, but then they did. Economy was pulled out of Zim. It was almost like a dream at some point. Like we were just being told every day, oh, the Zimbabwean dollar fell, the Zimbabwean dollar fell, the Zimbabwean dollar fell, up until people were carrying like this bunch of bricks of so much money to go and buy like bread and stuff like that, of which that's something that's really bad, So you can say that why did it go through all this? Yeah, we will speak about that when we look at just why is the rest of the African countries in South Africa, and why are African leaders failing their own, and then that causes then this massive movement in South Africa. Why are the leaders failing their own? These questions are posed to me by Azania Shabari.